Okay, let's try this again. Welcome back to another episode. We are going to film a podcast today, or sort of, whatever you want to call it. We haven't done one of these in about a month, so since we're in the middle of deer season, we're going to do one over deer. We did one about a month and a half ago over hogs, and today I have Bryce from Brush Brothers Outdoors with me today, and he's been having some good luck over in West Texas, making some pretty cool videos. So you guys will want to go check him out. He will be linked down below. And right here I have 5 points of some things that we're going to cover today, and the first is deer and rut. The first thing we're going to talk about today is the deer and rut, obviously, but if for your area, if you don't know when the rut is going to kick off, you can look for signs of your deer. So if you're sitting in the stand and you see deer making a scrape or a rub or marking their territory, like they will find stumps, trees, certain locations on where they travel where they will mark it and they will claim it as theirs, and then other bucks will cruise through and try to take over, and that's all part of kicking off on the rut. Another thing that you can look for signs is if you're paying attention enough beforehand, is if you're looking at your deer through trail camera pictures or you're out in the field and you see them, they look like normal deer. Well, as the rut gets closer and closer and closer, their necks will start to swell. So you'll see that they have much bigger necks. My buck that I shot, what was that, 2 weeks ago?
Yeah, about
two weekends ago, his neck was starting to swell. And with this cooler weather, I think the rut has officially kicked off here in Bosque County, and it's going to be really, really good. I've noticed on trail cameras, since we have one trail camera that sends us pictures, that we're getting a lot of deer movement in the day again. So they're starting to move during the day, looking for does, and their patterns will be really, really crazy.
You will also notice that if you're keeping up with your trail camera pics and checking them pretty frequently, you'll notice that your bucks are starting to travel by themselves. They won't be with other deer, the other bucks. You'll see your mature deer by themselves. You will also notice that if you're sitting in the stand, you got a couple young bucks at the feeder. The young bucks are at full alert looking. You can bet you're probably going to be looking for either a pig coming in, or you're going to be looking for a dominant buck coming in.
Yeah.
And that's how you can tell usually your mature deer when your other younger deer just absolutely take off from the feeders and that dominant buck comes in. And
yeah, I didn't think about that either, but those are some really good points. If you're paying attention to the travel area or the trails and things like that the does are using, then this time of year or during the rut would be a really good time to move away from the feeders, unless you've got does consistently hitting feeders. Move away from the feeders and go set up on trails. Go set up around watering areas or things of that nature. Just get away from the feeders if the deer aren't at the feeders, and go find trails that they're using all the time. And I almost promise you that you will see a buck, or you will see several bucks, because they're using these trails. They're trying to stay like they're alone. They're traveling alone, and they run and run and run for hours upon hours looking for does and heat. So that's why they look so bad towards the end of the year, towards the end of the winter, is because they've just been running all winter long looking for does, and they do not stop. So a good way to catch up with these bucks is if they're not coming to feeders to feed and they're looking for does, and your does are taking different travel paths or they're going different ways, go set up on a trail or something of that nature to increase your odds of seeing and shooting a big buck.
another thing you will notice during the rut is that you can have a 6.5-year-old buck, a body of a 6.5-year-old buck go from a 6.5-year-old body to a 4-year-old body, just because of all the running that they do chasing the doe and running the younger deer off. So
I know in particular, it was before I actually started filming all the hunts, but one morning I watched, I was hunting with you, but I watched, it was 2 or 3 bucks, and then probably a good 5 or 6 does out in the field about 200 or 300 yards away. And I watched the bucks. They fought each other, ran each other off. The dominant one ran the other 2 off, and then for probably a good hour to 45 minutes chasing does back and forth, full blown sprinting, running as fast as they could, and I couldn't believe it. And they did it, and then they finally disappeared over the hill. But they did that for a good 45 minutes to an hour, and that's what those deer do. They will run till they're dead almost. I mean, it's incredible. So number 2 is going to be how to age deer. In high school, I took a ag course or whatever, and I learned how to age deer by their teeth, but I can also look at their body and give a good estimate as well. A lot of people want to age by horn size, and that isn't a very good method because deer antlers are going to be all different sizes depending on your location. So if you know your area really well and you know your location and the type of deer that you have, then I guess that would be an okay way to do it. But judging by their teeth, which I may be able to drop in some pictures of their teeth of a yearling all the way up to like a 10.5-year-old deer, you'll see a huge difference in their molars all the way back, and you'll see, I mean, they'll go from really sharp, jagged points to really rounded off and nothing left. That's one way to do it, and you can tell, you can see it in better detail if I drop a picture in, if I can find one. But you can also tell by looking at their bodies. So on a 2-year-old deer, they're going to be not quite full size yet, but they're going to be almost. I mean, they're going to be pretty big. And you'll notice that when you look at a 2-year-old, in most cases in free range hunting places, they're not going to have just absolutely ginormous horns. Well, you can tell by looking at their front brisket if it's really saggy. If it's really rounded off and saggy, then you have a more mature deer. Now, if it's tighter and it's closer to their chest, then it's not going to be as old of a deer. Another way is if you're looking at trail camera pictures and you see a buck standing broadside and he has a really concave back and a really big pot belly, that's an older deer. And the younger you get, the less and less concave you have, and if you have a younger deer like a 2-year-old, you're going to have a much straighter stomach line and their bellies won't hang as much. You can see it in their faces. So I know around here in around Bosque County, the deer around here, when they're younger, and this goes for does also, if you're going to shoot a doe and you don't want to shoot a really young one, you can tell by looking at their faces. So a lot of times around Bosque County, the deer are going to have their noses are going to be longer. Their whole face structure is going to be longer. Well, as they get older, their face kind of shortens up, and they go more what they call Roman nosed. And you can also see it in the colors. And this could change depending on your location. But I know here in Bosque County, whenever you see a more mature deer, they're going to be darker, all from their nose, their face, all the way back to their tail. They're going to be a darker color, and they'll have a lot of gray in their face. And again, that could change depending on your location, but it's pretty cool. It's a pretty cool and pretty easy way to quickly judge an animal or a white-tailed deer if you're looking to shoot a doe and you don't want to shoot a young one. You want to shoot something more mature, and same way with your bucks. To see if is that a 2.5-year-old? That's a really nice 2.5-year-old, or that's a really nice 3-year-old, but probably shouldn't shoot him. I should give him a couple more years and see what he grows up to be. Another good way to age them is, Bryce brought this up as a good point, is if you're seeing deer and you're looking at a buck that has a really caved in back, a really big, like, I guess saggy would be the word for it, brisket, and they're really pot-bellied, but they have really small horns. That could throw you off. Well, what that means is it's not a young deer, judging by the body, but it's also not. But then it's also a really old deer, because you can look at its horns and say, okay, then it's on the downhill slide. And I know in Bosque County, about the oldest you want to let a deer get before you stop giving it extra time to grow bigger horns, it was going to be about 5.5 years. So a 5.5-year-old deer is going to be its full mature. I mean, that's as big as its horns are going to get, because the next year then it's going to start downgrading, and that's because of age. So I know, like where you hunt in West Texas, it's going to be like 6.5, right?
Yeah, we usually let 6.5, sometimes 7.
So they're shooting older deer, they're giving them more time. And I know the guys down in Mexico that are hunting on leases down there, they let their deer go to 8.5, 9.5, sometimes on the occasion 10.5 years old before they shoot them, because down there, because of their location, that's when those deer reach their maximum potential. Whereas here in Central Texas in the hill country, it's different. You give them about 5.5 years and they've reached their maximum potential, and then they're ready to be harvested. So number 3 is going to be shot placement, and there's a trillion different things we could say here about shot placement, but if you have a deer broadside to you, I try to shoot for just directly behind the shoulder blade or right through the shoulders. I'll throw up a picture and you guys will be able to see the anatomy of a whitetail, and you'll see where their heart is located and you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. But another thing is you absolutely have to be patient whenever your deer first come in and you're thinking about shooting one. If you don't give them time to settle down, then whenever you shoot, especially with a bow, whenever you shoot, you will see the animal drop. And it's probably really easy for you guys to tell in videos in a slow motion replay, but it's hard to tell whenever you're out in the field. But they will do what you call jump the string. And I have seen people shoot at animals and completely miss over the top of their back because the animal was skittish, and as soon as they shot, they heard the noise and they ducked and the arrow went right over their back. So you really have to give them time and be patient with them. Let them settle down and eat. And I know a lot of you guys have commented that we should have taken shots earlier. Well, the reason why we don't is because you let them settle in, you let them eat, and with whitetail you can tell whenever they're starting to calm down, their tails will start flicking, and their ears won't be pinned back. They'll be eating,
not
and
as skittish
yeah,
anymore.
they won't be as skittish. They won't be moving around as much. Their heads will stay down longer while they're eating, and they'll pick it up every once in a while and kind of look around. That's when you know that they're settled in. As for shot placement, a double lung shot is just as good, if not better, than a heart shot on a whitetail. In my experience, anyway. I shot my buck 2 weekends ago, and I double lunged him. That dude ran 45, 50 yards, and I watched him go down. So it's just kind of, wherever you put the arrows, where you put the arrow. I would advise to stay away from the guts, obviously. Mm-hmm. But if you do happen to shoot a deer in the guts, this kind of rolls into point 4. You absolutely have to wait. Give them plenty of time, even though it's hard sometimes to sit in a stand or go sit in a truck and give your animal time to expire. If you do end up shooting a deer in the guts and you go pick your arrow up, you smell it, or you see gut remains or whatever, you see that on your arrow, then my immediate reaction is to back out and give it at least 2 to 3 hours. I don't know, have you given it longer than that?
No, that's about time we wait.
I mean, I'd give it 2 to 3 hours and then just back out and try to be as quiet as you possibly can. Go back to the truck. If you shoot it in the morning, go eat lunch, go eat breakfast, whatever. Come back after lunch and take off and track it. The best way I found to find gut shot deer would be a dog, and I know that that's not possible for some of you guys in certain counties because they don't allow dogs, tracking dogs. But that would be my best advice is to get yourself a tracking dog and see if you can track it down that way. A lot of times, I don't know if very many of you know this, but any gut shot animal, this goes for pigs, whitetail, anything, when they're shot in the guts, they will go for water. They will go find water and they will drink water. So it's a really good idea to go find creeks, like they're running creeks, or go find a tank, some sort of water source they're likely to be close by. Shot placement, again, like I always shoot for the heart. I mean, I've noticed that when I've shot deer, whitetail in the heart, there is a pretty good blood trail, but nothing as good as what you see whenever you shoot them in the lungs. And I'm not exactly sure why that is, but I mean, I've just always noticed that whenever you shoot anything in the lungs, you usually get a little bit more of a blood trail and a better blood trail than when you shoot something in the heart. So, but still, I mean, both shots will make an animal die in less than 50 yards, 50, 60 yards usually, and they're dead within 20 seconds. So it's just it's important to practice in the backyard, practice your target, and you can hit the bullseye all day long, but as long as you take that mental mindset to the field with you whenever you get in the stand, like, okay, there's my target, and you imagine a bullseye right behind the shoulder or right on the shoulders, and draw back like it's nothing, shoot it. It's all about mental preparedness. I mean, you have to take that same mindset and carry it over into the field with you, and that's what makes you successful.
The best way to get a good heart or lung shot is have your deer quartering away from you. That also helps with your deer jumping the string. Usually when you let them get settled in, they're quartering away from you. They have their head down eating. They have that, whichever way they're facing, say if they're facing to your right, they have right leg up, left leg back. You want to aim to shoot right behind the right leg, and you want it to come out the left shoulder.
Yeah.
That will get you one of the best kill shots.
Yeah, and they won't run far at all. It's like you said, I'll always take quartering away if I can get it, especially on hogs, bigger hogs. It's just, I mean, you're going to go through, you're going to hit the heart, you're going to catch lungs out the opposite shoulder. And what that does is, I wish I had a picture of when I've done it before, but a lot of times when you take a quartering away shot like that, you're going to break arrows. And that's just fine with me. I will shoot animals and break arrows all day long. That's part of bow hunting. But the thing about it is, whenever you shoot an animal like that, that arrow goes in through the, let's just say, like you said, through the back right shoulder, just behind the shoulder blade. It passes through, and if you're looking at an animal, well, then it comes out on the opposite shoulder in the front. So, I mean, if you were to stick something in between my hands right here and try to run or try to move my hands like this, it would stop, and that's where you get that break in the arrow. But whenever that happens, that slows down their momentum, and an arrow breaks inside of them. Sometimes the broadhead's still inside of them. It just kind of depends on how it happens. But a lot of times when you shoot them through the shoulders like that, they can't run very far, even if they want to, just because of the arrow being in the way. Their shoulders don't work anymore, and you know, if you make a vital shot, and they're not going to run far anyway. But I've just noticed that. I've broken lots of arrows, but that's part of bow hunting. I will break an arrow on every single animal that I shoot. That's cool with me, just because that's part of it. And so, we're taking an animal's life for the trophy, for the fun, the sport, the love of hunting, but also to put meat on our table, and that's part of it. So, you know, an $8 arrow for a full evening of absolute fun and bringing a video to you guys is totally worth it. Like we were talking about a while ago, point 4 is the wait, is to have patience. You guys noticed me a couple weekends ago when I shot my buck, I sat in the stand, I shot it at like 7:40 something. I don't remember the exact time. But I pulled up my phone and I showed you guys the time and I said, okay, it's 7:40 something, blah, blah, blah. I'm going to give it till 8 o'clock. Even though I had watched my deer run out into the field and fall over and die, and I knew he was laying there. And I could see him clear as day. I gave him time because I didn't want to go over there and that dude get up and take off running, because whenever you bump an animal like that after they've been injured, they will run and run and run and run some more until you just don't find them. I've heard people tracking their animals as far as a mile and a half, even with tracking dogs, because they didn't make a good shot, or they did make a good shot but they bumped the animal. So I know another situation for me is when James and I were bow hunting one evening. We ran up on a group of hogs. I shot my hog. He ran right past me off to my left and died another 30 yards behind me. Well, James shot his pig and he clipped one lung. Well, we chased that hog over 600 yards until we hit the property line. But what had happened is, as soon as we shot it, we saw where mine had died, and then we took off and went and looked for his and bumped it 2 different times. It had laid down to die right next to some water, a creek that ran through the property, and there was a puddle of blood this big. But the problem that we were facing is these animals are resilient, especially hogs and whitetail. They're super, super tough, and you run up on them, you bump them, they will take off and be gone. And they'll run until you quit chasing them. So we ran up into 2 separate situations, or 2 different spots where there was puddles of blood this big or bigger, and I mean, it had obviously laid down to die, but we walked up on it and bumped it. So have patience is the moral of that story. Just have patience. Even though you see your animal down, you want to get down immediately and go look at it. Have patience, because you could end up turning, like my hunt of a lifetime, into, oh crap, there goes my deer. I don't know where he's at anymore. He's still running to the next county. So have patience.
Another thing is, when you have patience, when you do get out of the stand, you think it's time, approach your game from behind. Always have something to use your bow or use your gun and tap your. What should I say?
Tap it on the butt. Yeah.
Tap it on the butt and make sure it's dead. You don't want to go up there, just grab its horns, have a deer buck take off, stab a hole in you if you and that's it, or have a hog come up and get you with one of his cutters. So
that was a good point. I forgot about that, but I said that the other night whenever I was.
We walked up on our fox.
Yes, we walked up on the fox, and then also whenever I walked up on my deer, I told you guys, I said, always approach your game from the backside. It doesn't matter what it is, approach it from the backside. And I was whistling and hitting it, tapping it, making sure that it was dead for my buck, and then also for the fox. I just do it out of habit now. I've never been in the situation where I've had an animal get up and take off running on me after I've shot it, but it's just always something that I made a habit of. So I shot that fox the other night, and I mean, obviously I could tell that his other side was blown wide open. I mean, I knew he was dead, but still, if you were paying close attention, you could hear me whistling, and I was touching in the back of him with the gun, the barrel, just to make sure. And then, we took pictures and did all that fun stuff. But yeah, that's a good point. I didn't think about that.
That's just for your safety, and
Right.
especially if you're out in the woods hunting by yourself, which it's not always good. Always have somebody with you that, if you can, to hunt with you. But if you're by yourself, that's a good tip.
Yeah. Number 5 is going to be the setup. So like your stand setup, your decision, like where you want to put your stand, put your feeder. And I know for me and around here for you also, our stands are set up where they're good with south winds. So the south wind's blowing back in your face. We like to pick, in one situation on the lease that I'm on right now, it's 2 big fields. There's 2 big fields, and there's a line of brush that runs down the middle of them to separate them. Then there's some more brush down here, and the river runs down that way. So I put my stand and the feeder down in the corner of the field. It's just a good funnel point where the deer are coming from the river. They're coming up out into the fields to feed, and the feeder's right there in the corner. It's perfect for them. They still feel secluded. They don't feel vulnerable. They're off in the corner, and they can feed and then go back down in the bedding area down to the water. But I love hunting up in the air. Do you like hunting up in the air or on the ground?
I love in the air. Right now,
Yeah.
my setup's on the ground in West Texas because it's a lot of mesquites. So we have box blinds on the ground, but we love hunting tripods. That's one of our favorite setups is hunting a tripod.
Tripods, ladder stands, climbing stands, all that, or even rifle blinds or bow blinds that are elevated. Those are my most favorite types of stands to hunt. But as for a feeder, you always want to think about where you place it. I know in a bow stand, if you're sitting here just like this, you don't want to put the feeder directly in front of you, because then you have to figure out a way to turn to make this shot right here. So with all of our setups, and in some situations you're put in that you're not able to put the feeder off to your left if you're a right-handed shooter. So I always try to place everything off to the left. That way I draw and I can shoot just like this. I don't have to move or turn my seat or turn in my seat and potentially scare something off. I like to set up and know where the deer are traveling. I like to know where the deer are traveling beforehand, or pigs or whatever, and set up according to that. So if you've got game trails that are heavily worn, that are heavily used, and you see that, you go scouting around and you find out where they're traveling mainly, and then you can try to put your feeder near a water source or off of a water source, depending on the time of year, and put it on a trail, and just kind of figure out, okay, this is their bedding area. I don't want to be in their bedding area. I want to be kind of close to it. Maybe set up on the trail that they're using going in and out of their bedding area, and they'll stop to feed. I've always had the best luck doing that right there. And now just going out and somewhere and picking a random location without scouting beforehand, sometimes you get really lucky and you have a really good spot, and sometimes you're like, wow, this is crap and there's nothing hitting this spot. So it just kind of depends. What else you got?
In West Texas, we scouted our couple spots before we set up, and our deer travel through big ravines in West Texas, so we set up about 150 yards from these big ravines in these their travel areas, and so that's where we have found the most of our luck is, about, it can be a couple hundred yards from the ravines, but
there's several different apps you can use. Google Maps. There's another one called Hunt Stand, I believe. I think I have that one on my phone. And it uses like a satellite type deal. But it won't show you, I mean, depending on how heavily worn a game trail is, it won't show you the trails, but you can go to your hunt zone on Hunt Stand, and you can basically go find your hunting area, and you can mark your spots of where your feeder is, where your stand is. Then you can use that map to zoom in and say, oh, that looks like a pretty good funnel of where animals may be traveling, or there's a water source, there's a pretty good little clearing where I could stick a feeder or whatever. And I mean, that's just part of scouting, is to find your setups maybe beforehand, before hunting season. I mean, instead of just going out and setting up, you go out and scout around and say, okay, there's a water source, there's a field where they're feeding, let's set up in between them, catch them traveling, or let's set up on the field, or let's set up on the water source, depending on the time of year. I know in the summertime I like to be closer to water because especially the hogs are going to be down in the tanks wallowing. They're going to be the deer will come down, especially to water in the early season. And then as winter progresses, fall into winter, then you're going to realize that, okay, I should probably be closer to a food source, because that's where they're going to spend more of their time. They don't need as much water in the winter. They're going to spend more time eating, and the reason for that is because that the more they eat, the more body heat they have, the more fat that they have, keeps them warm in the winter months. Oh, one more thing I wanted to add in. I just remembered this. This goes back to point one. Is deer in the rut. Is whenever you set up and you're seeing your deer coming through, you see a buck come through and make a scrape, you can almost 100% be positive that another buck's going to come through and check that scrape. And I didn't mention this also, but you're going to find that these bucks are going to check, depending on how many different deer you have in the area, these bucks are going to come by and check that scrape every day and mark their territory. And sometimes multiple times a day, sometimes once a day, once every other day, depending on how far they're traveling looking for does, that sort of thing. But if you see one come through and make a scrape, you can almost bet that there's going to be another one or two or three more come by and check it and mark it as theirs and then move on. So if you're noticing places where deer are making scrapes, and you see, so it's a scrape and what else? A rub.
They rub.
Yeah, where they're rubbing their antlers or they're scraping the ground or anything, you'll see them, and just know, okay, there's a buck doing that in this location. If you're hunting for big whitetail bucks, go move in that area because they will be coming through. Another thing that I've noticed, this is kind of weird, but another thing that I've noticed that's been kind of popular here in the last year and a half, and I read this on Texas Bowhunter, is guys are making their own scrapes. So they're going and finding the trail that they know that deer use, and then they will scrape out a part in the ground, and then they will pee in it. I mean, I don't know how it works. I've never done it before, but I've read where some guys are having some really...
It gets the buck's attention.
Yeah,
Stops them.
Yeah, I've just read where some guys are having some really good luck doing it by making their own scrapes, human scrape, I guess, if that's the way you want to look at it, and then having bucks come by and check it and marking it as their own. I mean, I've never tried it, probably won't ever try it, but it'd be a fun thing to test and see how it works. But so I hope that a bunch of this information helps you guys, take it with a grain of salt, or take it and use it and maybe be successful. But yeah, we love sitting down and sharing this kind of information with you guys and helping you out to be a better hunter, to be a better fisherman. I mean, we can do some fishing stuff here pretty soon. If you guys like these kinds of videos, drop a comment down below and let us know. If you want us to do this sort of video on elk or some other different animal, we will take the time to sit down and do another one.
If you ever have any questions, just put it in the comments, and if we don't know the answer, we will find the answer.
Yeah.
We will look it up in another video, or we'll let you know in a comment what the answer to it is. So
yeah,
don't be afraid to ask.
Yeah, we all, you guys know that I always check the comments and reply to comments. So if you guys see it and or you have a question and you want to ask it, go for it. We'll answer it to the best of our ability. But if you guys like these kinds of videos, just drop a comment down below. But I think that is all we have for now. We will be coming out with another podcast. We'll be talking about hogs some more. I know that we did one, like I said, about a month and a half ago. So we will jump on and do another one over hogs and talking about their behavior more. But we appreciate you guys watching. Thank you so much for all the love and support the last few months. The growth has been absolutely incredible. The link down below will be my Instagram, and go check this guy out at Brush Brothers Outdoors. We appreciate all the support. We love each and every one of you, and we will catch you on the next video.